Hello and welcome back. Today I have a new tip for you. Today we're going to be talking about how to compensate for this seam that seems to pull way to the right when you're working in a half double crochet. Half double crochet is one of my favorite stitches. I love how it looks. I love that it's taller than a single crochet, but you don't get the really large spaces of a double crochet, and it's got a kind of a better, nicer drape than the single crochet. So I just really love working in half double crochet. However, I don't love that when you're working in the round and joined rows that you get that seam that drastically pulls to the right. When I was designing my arm warmers, I worked those in a half double crochet and I wasn't willing to budge on changing the stitch, so I just figured I needed to find a way to compensate, and there's actually a very easy way. So it's very important that you know, this is just a swatch, this is not a project, but whatever you're working on, make sure that you know the stitch count for each round, and all you need to do is stick to that stitch count and make sure that if your stitch count is correct, then this tip shouldn't affect the project in any way. So to compensate for it, what we're going to do is when you're working that first half double crochet, you would normally work in the same stitch as the chain, but to compensate for it, we're actually going to start in the next chain. So we have skipped over that first one, which means we have lost a stitch. So keep in mind the stitch count of your entire row. Make sure that you keep that stitch count the same as it should be. So you're going to finish the row as normal, working a half double crochet in each stitch. Okay, so when we get to this last half double crochet, you're going to work 2 in that same stitch. And what this does is it compensates for the fact that you skipped this first stitch. And by working 2 in this one stitch, it's going to push the seam back over. So you're going to join not in the chain, but in the first half double crochet. So you ultimately skipped a stitch, made it up on the end, and this pushes the seam back over. Now, you can't do this every round because this pushes it over too far. So what I recommend is skipping the first stitch twice. So you're going to work the compensation row twice, and then you're going to work the next row regular by working a half double crochet in the same stitch, 1 in each and only 1 in the end. This is why I said it's super important that you keep track of how many stitches you have. As long as you're working the same amount in the row that your pattern calls for, working this adjustment will not change your pattern. Okay, so I'm back at the last stitch. So we had 2 in the last stitch. You're still only going to count that last stitch as the last one of the round. We're going to work 2 in that one. This pushes the seam back over, and then you're going to join with the first half double crochet, not the chain. This keeps the stitch count consistent. So you can see that these 3 have lined up while this one has drastically gone to the right. Now, like I said, you cannot keep going with the skipping the first and working 2. Otherwise, your seam will start to do this. So I have found that working 2 rounds where you skip the first stitch, work 2 in the last, and then finish, and then so you work 2 of those, and then 1 regular round where you work a single crochet in each stitch around. So 2, 2, 1. So you work 2 of this and then 1 regular, 2 of this and then 1 regular. I found that that keeps the seam really straight. It will kind of do this, guys. Okay, it's not going to look absolutely perfectly lined up. It's going to kind of do this, but it definitely is not going to travel. If you're working for the arm warmers that I figured this tip out on, when I was designing it, the seam would literally just wrap all the way around your arm because it slanted so far to the right that it just wrapped all the way around, and obviously that wasn't okay. So with that particular pattern, the seam will go up the back, and you can see it, but it will be straight instead of curving. So we finish this up with 1 half double crochet in each stitch around. So when you work when you skip the first stitch and you work 2 in the last, that pulls it to the left, but it doesn't pull it to the left as much as working half double crochet in each stitch around as that does pull to the right. So that's why working 2 rounds with skipping the first half double crochet and working 2 in the last stitch, and then working 1 with half double crochets in each stitch around will keep the stitch consistent. But you can look at your project. I think things can be different if your gauge is different, or different things can have a different effect on different projects. So just keep an eye on your seam, and if you feel like it's still traveling to the left or traveling to the right, you can compensate by working more of each row to control which way the seam slants and to keep it as straight as you possibly can. Okay, so that round we worked 1 in each stitch around, 1 in the last, keeping the stitch count consistent, and then I'm joining. So you can see that it kind of will do a little bit of this as you go, but at least it will stay straight instead of traveling one way. So try this with your next project where you're working in half double crochet. When you're turning, this is not an issue because it compensates for itself every time you turn. But when you are working in the round to fix that slanted seam, try this tip. All right, guys, thanks for watching.